Nor, I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Curve Benders Live. If you've watched any of the previous sessions, I've been focusing very specifically on 7 steps to meet potential curve benders. This is coming from my most recent book called Curve Benders. And very quickly, if you haven't watched any of the previous episode, curve benders, in essence, are these incredibly valuable relationships in our personal and professional growth journey that beyond our short-term performance or execution or results leave an indelible imprint on not just what we accomplish, but who we become. And years later, we remember them for that impact because they often send us on the right direction and ultimately an amazing destination. So again, curve benders are these strategic relationships that accelerate our learning, our growth, and they shape, they mold the manager, the leader, the human being that we become. So when I published a book, as I've been out speaking and doing workshops and leadership retreats, and one of the most consistent questions that comes up is if these people dramatically, if not profoundly, can change your life, who are they? Where are they? How do I find them? And I often come back and respond that in the Matrix movie vernacular, I don't have a blue or red pill. Relationships and authentic, real, value-based relationships take time. And these are people that, sure, serendipitously can come into our lives. Think of that amazing professor or that first manager that took you under his or her wings and taught you not just a business, but how to be a servant leader, how to go above and beyond in creating exceptional experiences for everyone that you touch within the organization or external to it. These are the people that have this lingering, this incredibly lasting effect in our lives, in our hearts, in our minds over time. So again, they can come in serendipitously. I believe we can be more intentional about identifying and nurturing these relationships. And that's the premise of the book is just that. Think about those that can have really a profound impact on you, particularly in the future of work, in the future of kind of where you're headed, what work means to you, and the lessons, hopefully, that we've learned from this global pandemic. So we're in chapter 3 of the book. If you do have the book, this series, again, the 7 steps really began back on, it was early on, page 92. Has this great image of the 7 steps. And in the previous episode, I would encourage you to go back and listen to those if you haven't had a chance. So step 1 is really this very strong, very consistent personal foundation. And I talked about the mindset. So a growth mindset, a digital mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset that really helps you think and lead very differently your own life. 2, professional commitment, exceeding existing expectations of you. I still meet way too many people that are jockeying for that next position versus how do I become absolutely the best version of me in the current job that I have and really exceed expectations. I think meeting expectations continuously becoming table stakes. How do we exceed them? 3 was a catalyst. I took you back to one of the first chemistry classes or life science classes you may have had where you combine a couple of chemicals and one was a catalyst. And here I talk about an awareness of either something missing or a better version of you. You know, you were put on this earth to do bigger things, go after bigger opportunities, lead more, do more, be richer in your relationships, be richer and give more to others who may be in need. So all of these are a catalyst. And a good way to think of that is a spark that's within you. I've always believed lighting a fire under people doesn't last. How do we light a fire within them? Because that's sustainable. Where a catalyst is lighting a fire in yourself to saying, you know what, I'm going to go after a bigger, a higher. I'm going to impact more. This isn't about money. This isn't about power and influence. This is about impact. Step 4 was immersive inquiry. Once you have that spark, how do you jump in? How do you jump in with both feet? How do you jump in and ensure you do your homework, you do your due diligence, you make sure you get a fan of that spark to really create a flame that is, again, more sustainable about and really explore what's possible, what's probable, what's the potential, what's the path for you to get from what I call your now to next. That's all about immersive inquiry. In step 5, I talked about strategic relationships. Once you have some clarity of intent, here's where I'm going, here's how I'm going to get there, here's my path. Now you have a hypothesis. Now you have a plan of here's what I'm going to try to go do. And I've always believed a few, but really strategic relationships can nurture that kind of journey. And that drove into all of us that life's too short to make all the mistakes yourself. So who are those great relationships that can help me avoid the pitfalls I'm headed for, help me accelerate my path through the learning and the growth phases, and ultimately accelerate my traction and validation. And you know what? I'm not only right path, these are the right steps to help me get there. I coach a lot of people who are a sales manager, want to become a VP of sales. They're a VP of sales, they want to become CRO. Or CRO, they want to become a CEO. They're CEO, they want to become more proactive board members. And yet they like the perception of those next phases without fully understanding what's really involved, without fully understanding the pitfalls and the awesome, not just authority, but the responsibilities that come with each of those subsequent roles. I have corporate folks who want to go become entrepreneurs. Guess what? I've borrowed money from my credit card to meet payroll. And there's ebb and flows, and the highs are incredibly high and the lows are just soul sucking. And they don't think about those things. They like the idea that I can go ride motorcycles and fly fish while I still run a business or two. So relationships can really help you, the right relationships, shine a light onto better understanding of what you're getting yourself into. In the last episode, we talked about this idea of agile execution. So you have X marks the spot, right? Here's where I want to get to. I have a path to get there. My relationships are helping me think through, is that the right path or are those right steps, right? And who else do I need to get to know to accelerate my journey, but also avoid the pitfalls? This is the time to roll up your sleeves, head down, butt up, focused on, I'm going to execute. And I'm going to execute in that lean startup mindset of the minimal viable product. Love that idea. Instead of trying to do 75 things, how do I do 1 or 2 exceptionally well? Build that awareness, build that, yep, have you talked to someone? Yep, and here's what, and then kind of build on that. This idea of an iterative process, this idea of when you're 60 or 80% ready, move. These are the things that agile execution is all about. And specifically, I talked about in the last session, clarity of intent. Be crystal clear about where you're going, what you're doing. I'm working on launching a new business, and I can see it as clear as if I was walking into it today, and it does not exist. It doesn't exist in the market. And so the yellow flag that goes up is, am I thinking of a solution looking for a problem, or is this problem real? So we're spending a lot of time and effort on product market fit, and we've pushed to launch now, which irks me, but I've pushed to launch a couple of times to make sure we're thinking about the phase growth in an intelligent way. So clarity of intent was a big one. I talked a lot about committed bandwidth. A lot of people have aspirations, but they don't commit the bandwidth, the resources, the time, the effort, the capital to kind of make progress on what it takes to get to the next role, what it takes to go buy a franchise, what it takes to, want to join boards. And so the committed bandwidth is a critical one. And then last but not least, I talked about this agile or iterative process. I'm a big believer of, I've got a game plan. I'm going to go try part of it. I'm going to fail, but we don't fail. We have learning moments. I'm going to bring that back, iterate, try the next step, probably, misstep a couple of times, and then figure out what really works. And then this iterative process, if you minimize the hits, if you minimize the impact of those learning moments, so you've heard learn fast, learn forward, or maybe fail fast, fail forward, and then most CFOs always tell you to fail cheap, but if you make that failure the learning part of the growth, hopefully in the agile iterative process, that's how continuous improvement comes from. That's where really learning and growth wisdom comes from. So in the last episode, we talked about this idea of agile execution. In this session, and again, if you have the book, if you're following along with us, we're on page 104, I talk about connection cadence. This is the final step of the path to meeting potential curve benders. And connection cadence is all about keeping your strategic relationships updated. So in step 5, I talked about reaching out to your strategic relationships to kind of, planting the seed and, having the conversation of here's where I'm going, here's how I'm going to get there. And then they give you typically, 2, 3, great nuggets or introductions, or you should go talk to these 3 people based on what I've heard. Love this. I'm concerned about this. The single biggest mistake I've seen most people make is that they go dark on their relationships. So you and I met a year ago. You told me this great thing you're doing. What happened to it? That's one of the biggest disservices you can do to yourself, because you started a great conversation. You got them excited for you. These are people that are cheering for you. These are the people that want the best version of you. And the worst thing you can do is just leave them in the dark. So connection cadence is all about circling back with those individuals. And by the way, it's you do that up front. Again, an old sales manager told me to get your return ticket punched. And basically what it was saying is, ensure you retain that path to go back to them with an update. So with every initiative, with every project, with every aspiration, I have a list of targeted, most relevant, most strategic relationships. If I think of, by the way, I deeply believe in this idea that there's no new challenge. There's no new, right? Very few. It's the challenges or the obstacles are the ones that you haven't thought of. Somebody else has been there. Somebody else has been in the pitfalls you're headed for. So with every new initiative, every challenge, everything I try to do, I make a list of who are the most relevant relationships in my portfolio that are already doing that. That would be the best person to reach out to. And they may not be the best person, but you know what? They're a starting place. I want to reach out to Craig and say, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? He says, great idea. I want you to talk to these 3 people. Ken, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? Love it. Here's my concern. I want you to go talk to these 3 people. Great. And I planted the seed at the onset. May I keep you posted on my progress? Again, make it, say whatever it's use your own language, but I'm asking for permission to come back to them with an update. And guess what everybody inevitably says if they're a really good relationship? Of course, would love that. Would love to hear about your progress. Would love to hear how things are going. Would love to hear what's worked for you and what hasn't. And again, if you don't have a system, I use Salesforce, I use calendars, but I make sure I come back to them and really nurture that relationship. The other thing you're doing when you create a regular cadence, regular touch base back with your relationships in this context, is you're sending this signal that I'm not just about talk. It's not just an idea. I don't want to become a CRO. I don't want to become a CEO. I don't want to become a board member just because I'm bored and I have nothing else to do. It's an aspiration. I have a plan, and I'm disciplined enough to focus and execute on that plan. People love visionaries. People love stories. People love aspirations. People want to see you get to the promised land. Unfortunately, most of us are often left incredibly disappointed because we either meet people who have an idea a minute. First, I want to do this. No, I want to do this. No, I want to do this. And you're like, at some point, they're going to spend They're going to stop wasting their time with you if that's how you show up. Or you have great ideas and they never go anywhere. Same thing. They're like, last time I met with Beth, I gave her these 3 things and it went nowhere. Last time I met with John, I gave him these 8 ideas and these 3 people and it went nowhere. So if you don't hear anything else from me in this session, you need to hear this. With every interaction, you have 2 options and 2 options only. You're either going to enhance your credibility, your repute, the perception of you, or you're going to dilute it. The choice is always yours. And it has everything to do with how you consistently show up with your relationships. So connection cadence is about circling back with those relationships, really reaffirming, I heard you, I'm grateful for you, I took your counsel, I reached out to your relationships, here's the progress we've made, thank you. How can I help you? How can I reciprocate your kindness and your generosity? Who else can I help or support in your ecosystem? Those are all the subtle, the kind of less obvious or maybe more, overt messages you're sending with every connection, with every reconnection. So I also talk about, again, on page 105, a lot of these relationships, and you're going to want different buckets of relationships. So I talk about 5 in particular, and I think this will really resonate with you. I have some relationships who, like me, are very much visionaries, right? They don't get into the how you're going to do something. They're really phenomenal at, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I envision. Here's the big picture. Here's the promised land that I want to go after. They're fantastic in helping me really think through destination, purpose, outcome, impact, kind of that end result, right? I want to go there. I don't know what there is. I don't know what that looks like, but here's this nebulous future that I want to go after. We think a lot alike. They really help me with what if. That's interesting. Tell me more about that. So they're really focused on the big picture of what. You need those. A CRO, a CEO, a board member is a means to an end. What's the outcome you're after? What's the impact you're after? You want to impact a bigger piece of the business. You want to carry a bigger P&L to have greater influence. You want to get into meetings and circles and conversations and seats at tables you're not invited to today. That's the bigger picture. You want to go buy a franchise because you perceive that entrepreneurial path to be more of maybe that second half or the next phase of your personal and professional life. You want to go live and work abroad to get international experiences for you, for yourself, for your family, right? That's the bigger purpose. I want to launch this business because that's I believe to be my legacy. So those relationships are absolutely the visionaries. The second type, risk collaborators. I've always believed this very difficult for all of us to completely, think about it a second. You can't avoid risk. Risk is inherently built into all of our lives. It's in everything we do. So what you really want, what you really need are relationships that understand that risk spectrum. And in my experience, that risk spectrum comes from wisdom, comes from gray hair, comes from people who have done it. And they've failed and they've struggled, and personally, professionally, they know what it's like to take 2 steps, 3 steps, 5 steps back so they can take 1 step forward. They've lost money. They've made money. They have been fired. They've been laid off. They've been promoted. They've been, right? They've gone through the ebb and flow of life and work to really understand that risk continuum. And if you're particularly thinking of making a big leap, a financial one, personal one, I'm going to get up, I'm going to pack my family, I'm going to move across country, you better have a risk collaborator to talk about what if that job doesn't work out in 3 months? What if that CEO retires or leaves and the board replaces? What if the company gets bought and sold? You've just put all your eggs in that one basket. Not saying don't do it. Let's just kind of think through the risk options. Let's think through pros and cons. So I love, so if the visionaries are the big picture, go for it, aim for the stars types, risk collaborators are realists. Not looking to fire hose your aspiration or vision or all that you want to accomplish. Just keep it real. And think of the spectrum. The ones I love the most, make sure you hear. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm not saying don't go after it. All I'm asking, all I'm thinking, all I'm proposing for your consideration is the risk spectrum. Think about it. How can we, and it's not about risk avoidance. It's about risk mitigation. What's your plan B? What's your plan C? And if those don't work out, there's a whole bunch of other alphabets we can use. But risk collaborators are great sounding boards, particularly in your due diligence, particularly in your, what questions are you not asking? What are you not thinking about? You may have heard me say this. I'm never afraid of what I don't know. I'm always afraid of what I don't know because DK is a 2x4. Don't know, is a 2x4 with a rusted nail coming at my head. So risk collaborators are the realists. They are just phenomenal, sounding boards to really help us think through our, not theirs, our risk spectrum. Next one I call signal scouts. So visionaries, big picture. Risk collaborators, realist, risk spectrum. Think about plan B, C, and D. Signal scouts, I love these people. And I get my cup refilled when I have few relationships like this. And anytime I talk to them, I often try to meet them for breakfast or lunch, or when I'm traveling, I reach out, hey, I'll be in New York or I'll be in London. Can I buy you coffee? Can I buy you lunch? And they are, they have their finger on the pulse of trends, signals, what's next? What are they thinking? Not just fads, but observations in the market, observations in specific ecosystems or industry sectors or geographies or friends in Asia and Europe saw the migration of COVID and the impact it had on the way people worked, the way they lived, the way they played, the way they gave to others, and they saw that migration to the States. So if you have relationships in those parts of the markets and they're telling you things are shutting down, nobody's leaving, we're all going online, nobody's traveling. I distinctly remember coming back from my kids' spring break. We're in Cancun, Mexico, and the airports were shutting down. And the year before, I'd done 62 global speaking engagements. I get back and I'm like, there's no way people are gonna, and this isn't gonna be a week or two. Now, granted, I thought maybe a couple months, not 2-3 years, but they're not gonna have in-person meetings. I'm not gonna need to fly to go do the consulting or coaching or speaking, any of that stuff. So immediately doubled down on a digital infrastructure. This is a digital SLR with lights and cameras and setups to be able to deliver my value through a very different medium. And I got to tell you, that initial investment, you're like, whoa, never had to do this. Why do I need the virtual screen in the other room? And on and on and on. But when you talk to relationships, and the first, I want to say 100 days, I was on international calls. I was on regional, domestic, US, local, with the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, with the Marshall Goldsmith MG100 group. And when you hear from multiple relationships about what's happening in different industries and the supply chain, you heard about supply chain issues months ago. And the prediction was it was going to be a year plus till a lot of the supply chain stuff got resolved. So those relationships have and keep their finger on the pulse of key trends. And you've heard the analogy. You hear a data point, it's just that, it's a point. You hear 2, it's a line. You hear 3, it's a trend. So signal scouts are great on their own. And again, the analogy I use or the questions I use in my relationship interactions, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you thinking? What do you anticipate the second half of the year? What are you planning for 23? Inflationary pressures? Recession? And is that just US? Is that domestic? What's going to happen? What do you believe is going to happen with the midterm elections? And how will policies change some of that? And so those insights from a relationship is a data point. Have you ever spoken with several friends, or you kind of hear from several different sources, glimpses of the same core concept, a core idea? They can't all be wrong. So if you hear very similar data points from multiple, often very diverse, distinct, disparate relationships who don't know each other, those are the signal scout relationships that should help you identify the potential trend. Those are signal scouts that should help you really see, really think about, how do I better anticipate? If I have these data points, maybe this isn't the best time for me to go buy a franchise. Maybe we should push our launch back to the spring. Maybe, I'm really good in my kind of current role, current company, current position for another 6 months. Let me finish out the year. Maybe I'll get a bonus. Maybe I'll, work towards the results I was after and revisit this opportunity. I think I mentioned in a previous session that a mentor drove into me years ago. Throw away your stopwatch and get a compass. Doesn't matter how fast you do it. Is it in the right direction? Are you headed for the right destination? Is it consistent, congruent with your values, with your purpose, with your direction, where you aspire to get to for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones, for your team, So we talked about visionaries, big picture. They really help you solidify that vision, direction, where you're going. Risk collaborators are not there to eliminate. They're there to help you mitigate risk. Signal scouts are this innovators. They kind of get their finger on the pulse of what's happening, and they kind of give you those faint market signals early and often. The next one is radical candor. These are the relationships that are brutal. They are borderline uncomfortably candid. But we all need them. So when I go to these relationships, their comments are like, we love you. You're awesome. You rock at what you do. What do you know about this other industry? And they use several expletives, right? They kind of make sure you stay grounded. And I try to do that with my relationships, especially people I know, especially people you like, you trust, you respect, and they come to you with, I'm thinking of leaving technology sales to go get into nursing. Wait, what? Yeah, maybe it's a calling to help people. Maybe what do you know about that world? Or, you know what? I want to go join a public company board. Yeah, you and a whole lot of other executives. Why don't we start with and you, by the way, you've also never been on a board. Why don't we start with a nonprofit and maybe a small private company, and work your way up to. There's a lot more. Adam Epstein is a good friend, and he specializes in kind of mid-market, mid-cap companies, and there's so many more of those. And whether they're they're private or small public, those CEOs actually want your help. Phenomenal opportunities to make a huge impact as a board member of those small, mid-cap private companies than trying to go after a big public company board. So Radical Candor, they have a heightened BS radar and they just keep us humble. I'm going to go do all of these amazing things. Okay, great. You don't have a pot to pee in. And how are you going to go? That's a huge, you're going to go raise $100 million. You haven't raised one. How will you, right? And that candor we all need, because it is a splash of cold water in our face. And again, if I've always believed these relationships, their sense of realism. If I mentioned that risk collaborators are real, these people are brutally honest. And what they do is often through heated discussions, they're that friendly fire. You don't need to sell them. You don't need to convince them. You need to listen to them. Because in my experience, and certainly the ones that I have, if they didn't care, they wouldn't say anything. Oh, Nor, that's a great idea. Go for it. I'm planning on wasting $100 million. Great, go for it. I think way too many people are surrounded by yes people. That's a fantastic idea. You should drive that car, Thelma and Louise, off a cliff. What radical candor relationships will do is talk you off that cliff. And what I love about the relationships I have in this bucket, they raise yellow or red flags in my face of things I may have not thought of, things I haven't considered, ways I need to rethink my business model. They, in essence, risk-proof, right? In many ways. Or they often, tell me, love your vision, love the 75 things you want to go do. Why don't we start with one? Let's go do that one really well. Let's go nail that one. Build a following, build fans for what you're trying to do in this, build supporters, get a groundswell, get forward kind of momentum, get the tailwind that then allow you to do the next one. It may be more grassroots than you like. It may take longer than you like, but you know what? Hell of a lot more real and substantive, and not just the sizzle, but also steak. That's the radical candor relationships you need. The last ones, I call them innovation sponsors. These folks have unbelievable professional acumen. They have very strong relationship portfolios. They love supporting ideas that think and lead differently. They, you want to gauge their opinion. You want to gauge their perspectives. When they see a compelling idea, they get behind it. They get behind it with resources. They get behind it, relationships. Think of early stage institutional investors who work with technical founders and really wrap an agency model. They just put a blanket around those technical founders with what they need to bring their technology vision to life. The best franchise models do this, where you don't just sign the franchise and, hey, here's a box, good luck, see ya, let us know how it goes. They wrap love and support around you. The best managers I've ever worked for wrap love and support around you to go after a new market segment, to go after a new geography. They make sure you're successful when you're remote. The best boards I've served on attach another board member as a peer to you to really get you comfortable with that cadence or the rhythm of that business, the nuances of that industry if it's unfamiliar to you. So innovation sponsors leverage their ability to distill amazing ideas and visions and direction into, great, here's now a paved road, not a dirt or a gravel road, or not a dirt road that's got a whole bunch of potholes in it, a paved road to that destination. So what's critical in these 5 archetypes, if you will, you don't ever want to waste their time. Connection cadence is about coming back to those relationships. I often coach people that most of us can't remember more than 3 things. So if you come back to them with the 3 most compelling progress report you've made. If they raised yellow flags, you better address those. Listen, what's the size of the market? What's the right product rollout, phased approach? Who's going to do this? Ken, last time we were together, you asked about the product, the market size, the phased growth, and people. Let me tell you what I've done with, right? Because in my experience, they also take diligent notes, or they have great memories, and they remember, hey, Nord, last time you were here, we talked about these 3 things. What have you done? And if you tell me about 3 other things, that's great. But I'm going to go back to, well, last time we spoke, I asked you about these 3 things. What have you done with those? So stay focused on 3 things that they need to hear, or your 3 kind of biggest progress updates. Hey, listen, last time I met with you, I was talking about this franchise idea. I went and spent a week at one. I went to the headquarters. I've done, here's my financial model. What I really believe, I've done my demographic area research. I think this is the right geographic location for that. And here now my next. So I often share with them 3 great updates and then 1 ask. What I'd love your help on. The next hurdle for me. And then be quiet and listen. Because they're often delighted to hear of your progress in those 3 areas. And with the 1, now what you really need to do with that one is talk to this person. What you really need to think about that one is these 3 things. And now you're building that connection cadence. And I'm coming back, connection cadence, step 7, back to strategic relationships, agile execution. Connection cadence, strategic relationships, agile execution. That becomes my iterative process. And it becomes unbelievable momentum. I literally want you to think of the analogy of a gear. It becomes those 3 smaller gears move the bigger gear. And you kind of get that unbelievable tailwind momentum towards where you're trying to get to. It takes time. It takes resolve. It takes resilience. It takes any of these aspirations we've talked about, right? Getting promoted to next job, launching a new strategic initiative, pursuing an entrepreneurial dream, going abroad to do work, joining boards, launching a new business, any of these. I wish you could see it. I have a sign in front of me. If your dreams aren't scaring you, they're not big enough. Every one of these aspirations, if they were easy, more people would do it and do it successfully. They're not. They're hard. Some of you know this is year 20 of our Nord Group practice. And I got to tell you, over the years, a lot of people have been very kind. And I joke about this with really good friend, longtime friend and mentor, Charlie Pepperelli. I jokingly say, you got to love friends who show up and tell you, it's amazing what an overnight success you've become. And I know they're being kind and they have good intentions. But you always want to tell them, where the hell were you when there was nothing in my bank account? Or where were you when I was struggling to kind of get through the speaking and the coaching and the consulting and that arena? So with any aspirations you have in this journey, your own personal professional growth journey from now to next, I believe your single biggest and often only sustainable differentiation is your portfolio of relationships. Do not waste them. Do not be careless with them. You've got to do your due diligence. You've got to do your own heavy lift before you approach them in your thinking, and leverage few, never use, leverage few of the most relevant ones to kind of get you through that journey. And they need to hear your gratitude. They need to feel your gratitude. A good friend, Chester Eldon, has written a book on this idea of incredible gratitude. And we don't, I think, demonstrate it enough. We don't demonstrate it many ways authentically enough. They need to feel that gratitude. They need to hear it. They need to experience it. And how you show up says a lot more than what you say to them. When you do that, when you execute with that agility, when you make progress, when you demonstrate that you're serious about this and you're willing to invest the time and effort, resources in this growth journey, the best relationships are not only cheering for you, they become bolsters of your success. They're behind you, pushing you up that hill. Those are the relationships that become invaluable. And in that process, you'll meet individuals, you'll interact with individuals that see often the best version of you before you can see it yourself. And they push you to become that best version of you. And those are the relationships that are invaluable. Those are the relationships you never want to let go of. So this concludes the 7 series. I hope it's been useful to you. If you haven't listened to any of the previous episode, I want to encourage you to go back there in our podcast. So just norgroup.com/podcast. I would also encourage you to come join us in our NOR group, the forum. So norgroup.com/forum. I'm there every day. I'm posting articles, tips, techniques, exclusive events. I think we have a NOR Noon Live coming up where I think August 5th, I'm going to be live and I'm going to share insights from the first half, set of recommendations, prioritized recommendations for second half based on our coaching, consulting work that we're doing, based on the research we've done into kind of the second half of the year and the next calendar year. So come join us in the NOR Group forum, norgroup.com/forum. And we repurpose these live sessions into our podcast as well. And I always welcome your comments, your ideas, your suggestions, your perspective. Thanks for joining us. We've got some great guests coming up in subsequent weeks. So I hope you come back every Tuesday, noon Eastern. Come back and join, jump in your questions, comments, and I'll do my best to respond as we go. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you soon. Take care.